I am so excited for today's guest. We have Paco de Leon here. She is an author, illustrator, and musician. She is the founder of the Hell Yeah Group, a financial firm dedicated to inspiring creatives to engage with their finances, and Hell Yeah Bookkeeping, a bookkeeping agency for creative businesses. She lives in Los Angeles with her wife. Paco, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, we typically start all of our episodes by asking our guest to tell us a little bit about their money story. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, I I think my money story has a lot of layers, and the older I get, the more I realize how I ended up where I ended up and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Um, like 8 months ago, I made this discovery that like one of my core wounds as a person is I didn't feel safe growing up. Not to say that I didn't grow up in a loving, wonderful household with great parents who were doing the best they could with what they had. Um, but growing up queer and brown down in Orange County, California, at that time was challenging. I went to Catholic school for 13 years, if you can believe it. And when you go to Catholic school for 13 years, there's this underlying message that being queer is not okay. And for me, I translated that to me being fundamentally flawed. So I had a lot of issues around one, not being enough, and two, just like not feeling safe to be who I was, to reveal my identity. And it's taken me many, many, many years to realize how money and those narratives are interconnected. And so there was a lot of under earning happening with me. I never negotiated any pay ever, um, because I didn't feel worthy and I didn't feel safe bringing confrontation into this employer employee relationship. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to understand myself and trying to be compassionate with myself. And it's something I'm, chipping away at every day. And I recently spent 5 weeks in Italy with my wife, and it was amazing. And as I was there, I was like, wow, it took so much for me to get here. It took so much work and sitting with my feelings and facing who I was, and like doing the work, they say, to do something that amazing. And so, it's a process, and I'm just trying to enjoy the ride.
Thank you for sharing all that. And I think, it's hard to summarize your whole money story in just a quick minute or two. And I want to hear so much about how you actually unpacked a lot of those unconscious beliefs and, whether those are money narratives. But I mean, that's a lot to overcome. But I find it so funny that you said, doing the work with quotations because it sounds silly. And it sounds not related to money, but it's so important. And I find that almost every time we have these conversations, it's like, I actually just had to get to know myself and understand then how to do money within that. So thank you for sharing. Um, do you mind sharing? If we go there, how did you, unpack the safety mentality and the, being grateful for what you have rather than asking for more? How did you get through some of these unconscious beliefs?
Yes, so much of the things that I've achieved in life have been mostly a result of what feels like falling downstairs. So like I've just taken one step to see what has, where it will take me. And then, I just fall down the stairs and end up where I am. And so with unpacking all of these narratives that I had and these beliefs and these cognitive biases, I would say it started probably around 2010. And let me paint the picture. I was working I originally started working as an executive assistant to a financial planner at a wealth management firm. They were managing just north of $1 billion. And this amazing person who was a mentor of mine saw something in me that I didn't see. So that has been a constant theme in my life. Somebody who's in a position of authority historically, typically, a white male or a white woman will tell me that I'm good and enough, and then I will allow myself to see it. So there's been a lot of that happening. So he was like, yeah, whatever it is, kid, you got it. And you should become a financial planner. And I was like, okay. I thought I was going to go to law school, but I had actually done the projections and realized like, I don't want to be in six figures of debt. I don't want to be stuck being a lawyer. Cause what if I hate it? Cause most of them do. Um,
Yeah,
so
75% of them hate it.
they hate it. Yeah.
I
And
also almost went to law school.
I mean, for me, okay, if we go back like even further into my money story, like I remember being 15 years old and going to this private school, this Catholic school, and all of a sudden it was like, it was a bigger, there's not that many Catholic schools, so you know, you can only go to a few. And I remember going to this one in Fullerton, California. And so all these people from all around Southern California were all going to this school. So all of a sudden we're going from like a class of 70 in eighth grade to doubling that, but they're from all these different backgrounds. And so freshman year, my friend invites me to her birthday party. I go to her house and I'm like, oh my God, what? So she has like an In-N-Out truck, giving us free cheeseburgers and stuff. They had like a popcorn machine. It was just, I'd never been to a house like that. And then she's like, oh, you got to see my parents' bedroom. Or maybe I even said like, can you give me a tour? Because I'm really out of my depth here. And I remember they took me into the parents' master bedroom and they're like, and here's our parents' shower. And it was just huge. It was like bigger than my closet, had multiple shower heads. There was a seat. That was the first time I ever saw like a seat in the shower. And then I looked at her, I was like,
people in New York are drooling right now. Either that or they've shut the podcast off. They can't.
I'm so sorry.
Can't
I always alienate New Yorkers with my sunny disposition and saying how much space you have. I'm so sorry. My bad. But I looked at my friend and I'm like, what does your dad do? And she goes, oh, he's an attorney. I'm like, oh, let me write that down. Like that's a possible job to get a shower with a seat in it. But anyways, God, we're in the middle of the ocean without an oar. Where was I? You were asking me
we were
about
talking about unconscious
yes.
beliefs.
Okay. Yes.
And so you were talking about getting shifted into financial planning.
Right. Okay. So he's like, you should be a financial planner. And I say, okay, sign me up. I want to be a financial planner. And so of course I can't just be a financial planner, or I have to create this weird stepping stone called junior financial planner. So I create this weird stepping stone called junior financial planner, and I start doing the work. And at that time, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, decided that she needed to quit her job and she needed to start her own business. So kind of the rug gets pulled out from underneath me. This is one of my very first real world experiences where I feel like, oh crap, I'm not safe right now, right? This thing that I thought was solid ground has been yanked from underneath me. She's not earning an income in the household. I'm earning what I'm earning, and I wasn't earning enough. Like point blank, I don't know how we made it, because I had to start like riding my bike to work, which was 7.5 miles one way, 7.5 miles back in Los Angeles traffic. Great choices in my 20s. I started a garden to grow lettuce to save like $2 on Trader Joe's lettuce. Like I was doing everything I could to cut my expenses. And what I slowly realized was like, there's a floor here. And instead of like researching how to do negotiation and like confronting all my stuff, I just got really frustrated and I left that job. I'm so sorry that I'm rambling here, you guys, but I'll get to the point very quickly. So I left that job, and like I had always kind of felt these like signs that I needed to work for myself, but I always ignored them because I was afraid of responsibility. So I ended up working for this guy. We're doing marijuana consulting. I'm working from home. I'm basically doing research on the laws, the cannabis laws in different states as they're getting passed. I'm writing them in plain English. I'm creating business plans. I'm building financials for dispensaries and grow operations and all that stuff. And I distinctly remember like having dinner with my wife one night, and I was like lying to myself, but I was saying it to her, but I was lying to myself, and I was saying, I think I could do this. You know, my boss, he's really hands off, and I feel like I could really, you know, those lies that we tell ourselves to justify staying there. So I said that to her, and she was like kind of calling bullshit. And then the next day he fired me, and he's a straight white guy, and he goes, he wanted to like focus on something else, but he goes, hey Paco, I got to tell you something. Will you promise me this? And I was like, what? He's like, promise me that you won't get another office job because you're just too smart for that. And so I got this approval from this guy, right? This authority figure. And I was like, okay, you just took away my livelihood, but I guess I'm going to tell you that I won't go and get another job. And so I had like a meditation practice, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year by the time this happened. And I got unemployment, which is basically universal basic income, right? So I had a universal basic income. I was starting to sit quietly and really get to know myself. And I was like, not being in this state that I think a lot of 20-year-olds find themselves in, right? They maybe leave a household that was chaotic, and instead of like unpacking it and dealing with it, they just sprint towards more chaos, which is what I've done. So I finally have this opportunity. I have my unemployment, aka universal basic income, and I have a meditation practice. And I found myself finally allowing myself the space to just sit quietly. So every morning I would sit quietly and I would say, what the hell am I supposed to do? And I would just sit there. I'd set a timer for 20 minutes, or I'd do some weird YouTube meditation, but I haphazardly strung together a meditation practice. And over time, it allowed me to, one, look at my thoughts and not just cling to them so desperately, and realize that every thought I think is me. It's not, it's just a thought, one. And two, it allowed me to quiet myself enough to let my intuition speak to me. And my intuition said, hey, all of your friends are creative, you're creative. They keep asking, they're starting to ask you like, what are bonds and what are investment? They're asking you these things. Is it possible for you to, run a company that serves creative people? And I was like, I don't know, let's find out. So here we are, like, 10 or so years later, and everybody's seeing the results of this experiment. But throughout this journey, right, working for myself, I keep hitting these like blocks, right? So after I decided to work for myself, I didn't magically just make a lot of money. I found myself like a year later working too much, not making enough money, and I had to examine my beliefs, right? So I did talk therapy, which allowed me to, one, just feel my feelings in a situation where my whole life I didn't think I could. And then after talk therapy, I was journaling. Journaling allows this like stream of consciousness, this non-judgment of who I am and what I want and what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And then when I got a literary agent, I was supposed to turn in my book proposal and I couldn't. I was like, I'm a month past due, I'm 2 months past due, I'm 3 months past due. I was like, dude, what's going on? It's just words on a page. Just, so then I worked with a psychotherapist who's also a coach, and she helped me uncover all this other stuff. And she helped me explore my shadow, which is this, Jungian philosophy about these parts of ourselves that we reject and we abandon, and we turn away from them. And the more that we integrate them, the more the less control they have over us. And so it's just a stacking of all these different methods that I've gotten into recently. I've gotten into lucid dreaming. And that's been another game changer, where I'm like confronting people from my past who I didn't handle things gracefully, and I'm apologizing through these experiences in my lucid dreams. And so, I mean, that's been it, right? It's just me taking one step, let me start meditating, and then falling down the stairs of what else is there. Sorry, that was so long.
I love it. And I find it so interesting that you call it falling down the stairs, because the way I just heard it, it sounded like you were building the staircase, like one step at a time. Just like, I was like, maybe you fell down the stairs, but that sounds like you
Didn't
just
hear
keep
that.
going up.
You were like, yeah, on a path to like this higher functioning, more aware individual who's like tapping into their potential. That's all I heard from that. And it wasn't too long for me. I was captivated by it.
Thanks.
Paco, we'll send you the recording just so you can hear it again, because I want you to hear yourself be like, and I grew and I built and it's great.
But it didn't feel like I was trying to aim towards something. It felt like I was surrendering to something else. And I think that's why I call it falling down the stairs. I was just like,
I love that, because it wasn't like I need to be this and therefore I need to go for it. You were genuinely you, which I love. And I think as a product of all of the work that you've done and surrendering, we've gotten this beautiful product of finance for the people. And I have to say, Paco, as a visual learner, I loved your book. because not only did you write it, you illustrated it. And I feel like there's not enough visuals. I joke that, so I am a project planner, or, project manager, for essentially, is an easy title now. And I joke that sometimes when we get in these conversations, like, you just need to put a visual, and it doesn't exist in finance. No one thinks of visuals when it comes to money, and I really loved it. So can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write Finance for the People, and what sort of the execution on that looked like?
Yeah. So I read a book by an author and illustrator named Yumi Sakagawa, and the book was called There's No Right Way to Meditate, or no. That was a comic that she made. The book was called How to Be One with the Universe. And it's this beautiful illustrated short book. And I picked it up one day because I was into meditation, right? And I read it very quickly. It's very short. And I felt so inspired after I read it. Basically, what she made me realize was you could do something really unexpected with a topic, or something really original with the topic, and inspire people to feel some kind of way about it. And as soon as I read that book, I thought, I really want to do this with a financial book. I want to create something that's really thoughtful and artful and caring and helpful. And when people are done with it, or as they're going through it, I want them to feel exactly what I'm feeling, which is a strange delight, and inspired. Let me say that again, inspired. And I want them to feel like, wow, you could do this, right? You could address all the systemic issues in the world of finance and the economy at large, and still find your agency, right? You can still act. And so I just wanted people to feel differently about their money, about their relationship to money, about what they can do. And it took many years, and every job I've ever had in the financial services industry has inspired me along the way to create something that, frankly, when I was going through the financial planning courses, I just wished a book like this existed.
Sorry, I was trying to come off mute.
No
everyone.
worries. No worries.
Paco, can we shift gears for a minute, because you talk a lot in your book and in your illustrations about economic dignity. What does it mean to have it? And when is it real for people?
Yeah, I think, we can all come up with our own definitions of economic dignity, but for me, I just think we live in such wealthy, rich times with technology and money, and things are available to our society at this time. So it's very confusing to me when people can't make a living wage working 40 hours a week, which I think 40 hours is too many hours. I know that a lot of people are starting to think that now, but it's crazy to me that people have to take on 3 jobs to survive and make themselves stressed and sick and kind of kill themselves in order to make a living. That to me is not economic dignity. I think economic dignity is not going bankrupt if you got sick. Like if you get cancer, you also get bankruptcy. That's insane to me. I cannot believe we live in a world like that. Economic dignity is being able to get an education and not be saddled with the albatross of student loan debt. That's completely insane to me. And if you actually understand economics, it is much better for the economy as a whole if we just educate people and then they enter the workforce without having to worry about their student loan debt. It actually doesn't make sense. And then having people feel like they're respected at their job and they're not just there to be exploited. That if we could flip that and help people feel respected and feel like organizations exist for the benefit of many and not just the few at the top.
I feel like you've nailed it on the head, and I would love to share an anecdote from my own experience. And I know you mentioned, that cancer diagnosis can send someone into bankruptcy, right? And that's a very powerful example. And it's a very unique to America thing that the rest of the world doesn't see. And I'm not claiming that other countries have it all figured out and it's better or perfect. But like if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, an illness already it can really like set you back a few steps and notches. When you add that financial layer on top, it's actually a very scary and vulnerable position. But when you were talking about economic dignity, I have a very powerful example of how this changed for me when, and Katie knows this about my background. She's heard me talk about it a lot, but my husband's European and we actually lived in London. So like I started my professional career in London. We did a couple of years in Poland. We went back to London. So all of my professional upbringing was in countries where there was access to public health care. If I were unwell, it didn't send me anywhere like scary financially. I just went and figured out a solution with the doctors. I was very fortunate to be in my 20s and young and healthy and whatever. And we relocated to the US 6 years ago, maybe 7. And I felt this immediate shift in the power that my employer had on me, even though I actually resigned at UI in London and got rehired in the US. Like I was working for the same organization. I was working with the same team I had worked with internationally already. Like there was very little that should have fundamentally changed for me. But I felt like the gravity of, oh shit, my livelihood is attached to my feedback, the feedback that I get from my partners or the people I'm working with. Like so much more of my life depends on my employer. And I felt it. And I remember talking to my friends about it back in the UK. And it became especially real for me because I was pregnant very quickly. It turned out I was pregnant and I didn't realize it. So I already was having these feelings. And then maybe that was actually like my subconscious telling me I was pregnant, but that instinct. But I then found out I was pregnant and I had this like double down scare of like, oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't left the UK because now I'm not going to get proper parental leave. I'm not going to have access to resources. I don't know how much extra I'm going to have to pay out of pocket. These were things that were never on my radar. And it all hinged on whether or not the partners I worked with liked me and were going to give me good feedback. I mean, like if you think about that, it is mind boggling. That's all I could think about. And I was in a position of power. I was a white woman, highly educated, lots of international experience, walking into a job, negotiating my salary, right? And I still felt that. So imagine how it feels for a larger portion of our population, especially in the US.
Yeah, it's really challenging to like look at the situation of employer-employee dynamics with eyes wide open. And that's a big reason why I left traditional employment, because it was really hard for me to see a world where I was getting paid, 3, 4, 5, 10 times what I want, what I was currently making. Like I felt like I had agreed to be paid so little that it would just take so much effort. I just couldn't imagine making so much more. And I thought, what if I went on the other side of the equation? I probably could convince strangers out in the wild to pay me more, right? And stitch together a living. And yeah, the truth is I've been able to be, but also, I think people's attitudes are changing, and there's a lot more people who are openly trying to support, women-owned businesses that are owned by queer people, by women of color. So I also think that in a lot of ways, my timing is just perfect.
Yeah. And I mean, it's crazy because Catherine, your story, as well as Paco, your story, these pieces all seem to also come back to that safety narrative that we were talking about earlier, like economic dignity. Yes, there's a piece of, or there's a layer of that, which is truly just people should feel safe to make decisions about their life without feeling like they can't because of their finances. But there's also the piece of, the dignity of doing something you love versus being like, I have to do what I can to support my lifestyle. It's really interesting. And I was thinking about it because, your book has a piece that is highlighting how much the world is uncertain, it's unequal, there's a lot of stuff that's out of our control. But how can we feel safe still within all this system? And not only feel safe, but how can we prosper within a system like this?
I think if I really truly knew the answer to this, I would be president of the world.
I'd vote for you, Paco.
But I mean,
just do a hot take.
Okay. I think that we have to find our agency in every moment and realize that we do have our agency in every moment, despite whatever the circumstances are. And even in really extreme circumstances, we do have agency. We have the ability to change how we're thinking about something or to reframe it. I really believe that the reason I'm here on earth is, yes, to teach people about finances, but finances just happens to be the platform for what I think is really important. And that's perspective. That's helping people understand that they have one vantage point. But if you allow yourself to look at things from a million viewpoints, you get a better picture. You have a better understanding. You see what your options are, and you see that you have choices. And I think that's probably the most important thing to realize for folks when it comes to their finances. And to give you an example, a couple of the articles I read yesterday that blew my mind was one about a financial dominatrix who's made millions of dollars being a dom. The other one was
read that article, cray.
Yes. And there was another one about this Stitch streamer who allows people to pay money to disturb him while he's sleeping. Like he wears a shock bracelet and they could pay money to shock him. They could pay money to shine bright lights through the computer, I guess. Or maybe there's a program. I don't know exactly the logistics of it. But that just made me realize as I was reading it, there's so many opportunities and options and ways to make money and to exist in the world on your own terms. I just think you have to first really spend the time understanding that you do have options. And then the second thing, I think, which is a really practical thing to do, is if you are in a situation, because this happens to me all the time, and I do think it's because I have so much financial trauma, I'll do something spend several $100s on a very nice thing that I can afford. And I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, well, this is the beginning of the end. This is the first slip into complete loss of control, and I'm going to end up under a bridge. That's not going to happen. I know it's not going to happen, but we all have those moments. And if you are physically safe in that moment, and you do know that you're doing everything in your power to make sure that your financial life is stable and you're making it as anti-fragile as possible, I just take a deep breath or 3 and realize in that moment that you are safe. And it sounds silly, but I do it all the time, and it helps me feel better about that moment. And it helps me kind of zoom in, zoom out, whatever it is, and realize, okay, yeah, in this moment I'm safe, and probably in most moments I'll be safe.
I can sympathize with that too. I'm, clearly we've been doing this podcast for a few years, and we talk money all the time, and, about financial wellness and how to, make the right decisions with your money. And this past summer, my husband and I definitely experienced a loss. And I, for the first time, was finally giving myself some space to do some emotional spending. And I feel like one of the narratives that unconscious beliefs that I had was, in my early 20s, if I'm spending money, it'll probably feel good. And this was the first time though that I feel like I was consciously doing it, in the sense of, no, this is what you need right now. Like, this is, this is an okay thing because you don't do this all the time. And it's what you need at that moment. And sometimes that is okay. Like, you have built a safety net for yourself, so you're not going to spiral anymore. And so it's okay to splurge on things. And that's also okay. So I do find it interesting when you start to realize that unconscious belief or a money narrative that you used to have, when you quote fall back in, you're not really falling back in if you've set yourself up for that to be okay. I don't know. Did I just make any sense?
Yes,
No?
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's like it's a very powerful example, Katie. And Paco, when you're talking about the losing everything, like where your brain goes to like immediately losing everything, I recognize I totally have a scarcity mindset, and that's something I'm consciously working on right now. Like, why is it that I actually say to my husband, like at key moments, like when we dropped to one salary or when like I took a break or whatever the things were, right? Why is it always we're not going to be homeless? Like, where did I go from like where I am today to not having a home? Like,
You
I
fell
don't
down the
know.
stairs, Catherine.
Exactly.
That is falling down the
Like,
stairs.
it is such a long way to go. And then I'm going to take it a step further. I actually recently said to him as well, I feel like I put so much pressure on myself to do well at work. Like, I almost wish I like in an alternate reality, I could really slow down and like observe and watch it, like with nothing to lose, and almost do this experiment of like how little can I do before someone is like, okay, now you gotta go. Like, you're not meeting expectations. Cause I think it's like this narrow of a gap. And it's probably, I'm going to go off screen there, like this wide of a gap. But we're just so like, I don't know what the word is. It's just like, so it's like a funhouse mirror, like you cannot assess. And I feel with the scarcity mindset, I have that a lot where I can in 2 steps tell you how I could be homeless.
Right. Yeah.
Steps. Like,
Well, so much of our economics and so much of the marketing messages around us are so ingrained with scarcity. So I think it's such a common, it's used against us all the time. And like, I'm not a psychologist. Actually, maybe you can shed some light on this, Catherine, but I took a course and there was a psychologist who was teaching us about the trauma. The course is called Trauma of Money. And she was teaching us about, and this is also in my book, I put it in my book. She was teaching us about the human brain and what, we have these tendencies to, one, compare ourselves to others. A lot of psychologists believe that that's because there was like a lot of psychologists believe there was some kind of evolutionary purpose for that, right? So we can assess whether or not we're going to remain in a group. And if we remain in a group, then we'll be safe, right? Because we're social creatures, we need each other to survive. The other thing was that humans have a tendency to pay attention to things that are scarce. And again, the argument there is that there was some kind of evolutionary use for that. If food is dwindling or water is dwindling, that is something that we need to pay attention to and not just like lay around, So that's been a way for me to kind of feel okay about falling into this trap every once in a while. Cause I'm like, oh, the mushy noggin, the old technology in the brain is just, it's alarming. And I have to tell it like, hey buddy, I know you got some old processes in there, but we're okay, dude.
I love when that IT team just lets the brain go wild.
Yeah, exactly.
So I actually was wondering, because for a while you also co-hosted the money, or are you still co-hosting?
We just had that one amazing season.
Okay, so you co-hosted the season of the Money Diaries podcast. And for those who don't know, the Money Diaries was really powerful. And I love the fact that it opened up a little bit of transparency into people's experiences. But from doing that podcast and reading some of the money diaries, did that change how you either looked at yourself or looked at others when you saw how they were thinking about money and sort of seeing a little bit behind the curtain of what's going on up there?
You know, I my very first job actually was as a debt collector for Bank of America, and that exploded my perspective and it taught me how to talk to anyone about money, right? So I do that and then I move over to do small business consulting, which was kind of glorified bookkeeping. And now I'm inside of people's businesses and I'm seeing the numbers. Then I shift to financial planning. And now I could walk up to any stranger at any cocktail party and ask them for their tax return from the last year. And they'll just email it right over. They'll airdrop it right over because I've, like I'm in this, they want advice, right? They want help. And so by the time I do money diaries, I feel like I'm already so ingrained and like all up in people's businesses when it comes to their finances that it was a lot less of a shock and a surprise to be able to be able to be let in on their finances and their stories. I guess I was surprised that people wanted, my voice on a podcast to talk about these things. And truthfully, that still surprises me. And I don't think it's imposter syndrome. I think it's just funny to me that this thing that I've built up over the years, that I've explored, that I'm clearly an expert at it. And I spend so much time trying to understand it and think about people and why they are the way they are with money. It tickles me that society is like, yep, this is a job where you just talk into a microphone, you just say what you think and you get a check. That's crazy to me. And I love it. And, I'll definitely be doing it in the future.
I love it. And I hope, fingers crossed, this is the impetus for season 2. But yeah, I love Money Diaries just because I feel like it peeled back that layer for a lot of people who aren't constantly seeing other people's money. Because I think there's a lot of judgment in general. And I think maybe that's why people feel like they can't be transparent with others about their money stories usually.
Yes.
But something that I definitely think, I mean, saying you started out as a debt collector and talking to people about like truly their most like sensitive topics. I mean, I feel like that level of empathy, but also the ability to have some of those conversations is so important.
Yeah. I mean, they threw me just into the deep end. Like the job interview for that job was role playing with one of the managers. So I was like, I have no experience trying to collect a debt. So I'm sitting across the table from a very experienced manager and I'm just like, can you pay? And she's just like, no. And I'm like, I definitely didn't get this job. I was terrible at trying to get money from that manager. And then I got a call back and I was like part of that new class of people that got hired. I think the empathy comes from just being an intersectional person. Because my whole life, I felt like I've needed to make other people comfortable with who I am. I've needed to go into a room and speak a certain way and act a certain way and be funny and be charming so that that person doesn't think I'm, threatening, or I've had to make other people feel at ease my whole life. And that's come in really handy in this kind of a job. And it's come in really handy, I think, just being like not a dick on planet Earth, because all day long I just think, what is this person's experience? They have a story that I don't know about, and I'm annoying about it. It's comical because we'll be driving in the car with my wife and she'll get upset about somebody cutting her off or driving crazy, and I'll say the most annoying thing a person can say. I'll say maybe his kid's in the hospital, he needs to get there, you don't know. And so I've always had this ability to say like, here's a great example. You can look at a pencil this way and it looks like this, but if you choose to look at it this way, it's like an entirely new thing, or this, and that's my job here on Earth, is to help people see things from a different perspective.
Well, we're all better off for it because you're really doing a service out in the universe for people.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute joy and privilege.
I need to work on not getting pissed off when people call me up. But seriously though, could you imagine just going through every day with like a little bit more intentional perspective work?
Compassion.
Yeah.
Imagine,
Yeah.
because
Well, I'm going to tell you, Katie, I had a coaching session this week with my executive coach, and I explained just this concept of like how I'm like so frustrated that everybody else seems to not have to do their job, but I have to be perfect at my job. And like, that's so unfair. And how like, I can't even book a swim lesson for my kid or whatever without like having to do someone's job and whatever. And we talked about perfectionism and how I probably have
weird.
unrealistic
Do you
expectations
subscribe to that? I get that
on
magazine weekly.
and on others. Yes. And how what I'm directing out, even though these people don't see me getting annoyed, because it's more like I put the phone down, I'm like, oh, so stupid, or like, you know, I'm so frustrated. She's like, I think a little bit of what you're putting out is actually what you're like internally directing at yourself. And I was like, okay.
Unsubscribe. It's not me, it's everyone else. That's the
I don't
problem.
recommend it, but
All right, Paco, we're going to need your 12 steps of how to go up the staircase, do a lot of internal work. But I think this is the perfect segue to go right back to where we were at the beginning. You have to do the work on yourself in order to put it out in the world. And I was actually talking about this also this week with some friends, where I was like, there is so much that we can't control, that I am truly just, anytime something triggers or like pisses me off or like gets me right back to some trauma before, I just have to say my own, I'm saying it's a money mantra now, that I can't control it. This is out of my control. I can only do what I can do, and that's it. But if all I can do is be perfect, then I guess that's one way of doing it.
I love it. We all just got to ride the wave, you know?
We're all on some sort of wave,
we're all in this school, Earth School. That's what my therapist calls it. Which I love.
I like that.
Earth School. Yeah, when I'm going down that tunnel of like, oh, I could lose my job, or you know, and oh, there's no rights for women in this country, whatever. She's like, look, like we're all just here on Earth School. Like you can only do what you can do.
Earth School. Maybe that'll be the title of this episode.
Ooh, I love
Finance
that.
for the people in Earth School. I like that.
Yeah, we need to give a shout out. Yeah, it's not my trademark, but yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, Paco, I just want to say this conversation has been so enlightening and truly like refreshing for this beautiful Friday that we have. We do end our episodes with just one fun question. Well, it might be two, because we want our listeners to get to know you personally a little bit better. So this one, there is definitely no right answer or wrong answer. There might be a wrong answer. I'll let you know. But what is something that you will always splurge on? What is something that you will always skimp on or try and save on?
Such a boring answer. I will always skimp on something that is a commodity. If I feel like there's no reason to, you know, that there's not going to be something outside of just the brand on a thing, then I'll skimp on it. I'll always splurge on things that like make my body comfortable or allow me to be fully rested or improve the quality of my sleep. Those things are, as I'm getting older and as I'm having like 15 million jobs, I'm realizing that my sleep and my rest allows me to come to my work just better.
Sleep over at Paco's house. She's gonna have an awesome bed.
Definitely.